Jade Holland, Karen from Norman, Oklahoma. Wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Rose in Holland, Michigan. All neighbors. Eric, welcome.
Good to see Eric, yeah.
Yes. Jeffrey, Wyoming, Michigan. Welcome, welcome. Amy, welcome, Massachusetts. Well, this is exciting. Welcome everyone for coming out and spending an hour with us in this conversation. Nova Scotia Municipal Council, wonderful. Welcome, Donna. Springfield, Missouri.
Shout out to Springfield.
Hey, shout out to Springfield.
Always
That's right.
representing.
Excellent. Kelly Thurman from Texas. Wonderful. Welcome, Kelly.
I feel like we've got east to west coast or north to south, coast to coast now. I need to see east to west. See what we've got there.
That's right. Yeah, I've got Massachusetts. Oh, Chattanooga.
All right. Shout out to the east coast. Now we need the west coast. Directions, right?
Nice.
North Dakota. Way to go north.
Well, feel free to keep sharing as you come in to the space, and we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you first and foremost. Just really appreciate your spending some time with us today. I'll be your moderator. My name is Eric Smith. I'm the executive director, and I have the privilege and honor to serve as part of the Community Works team, formerly known as Great Lakes Urban. Community Works serves to, propelled our mission forward, which is to catalyze community potential by building more connected neighborhoods, cities, and communities, thereby making places more flourishing with greater levels of safety and public health and all the other things that come with being a more connected environment. And today we have a special focus for this episode of the Bright Spots in ABCD series. And we're going to talk about neighboring holidays, and in particular, the National Good Neighbor Day initiative. And Good Neighbor Day, we'll talk about that a little bit more. It's actually it's a holiday that's on the books, signed into law with congressional approval by Jimmy Carter back in the 70s. And so we just want to keep pushing and promoting it as just one point on the calendar in which to celebrate neighboring. And of course, that's really the whole point of today, is to cast that vision for neighboring holidays, and because how we celebrate and how we and what we celebrate matters and shapes the culture and expectations of the places where we live, hope, worship, and play. If we want to live in neighborhoods where neighbors belong and are engaged, then celebration needs to be an integral part of that. And so we have a couple of really, I think, just people that I just think deeply, highly of myself, but they really are respected leaders in this neighboring space and the ABCD space. And so that's Jennifer Prophete and David Burton. And a couple of things as we get started, just for a little bit of engagement. I would love for you to share in the chat if you were going to create an official holiday for your neighborhood. Think about a particular, if you want to memorialize a unique characteristic or something special and quirky about your environment, what kind of a neighborhood holiday would you create? And so I can think about, for me in my neighborhood, we host game nights, so that's what we do for Good Neighbor Day, just with our neighbors, immediate neighbors. But a neighborhood up the street, they host a craft an entrepreneurship day where the youth of the neighborhood get to sell crafts that they created and those kinds of things. So I would create a youth entrepreneurship day, would be my day. So what about you? Share in the chat. What would your national holiday be for your neighborhood? And while people are thinking, I know Let me say a couple things. You saw Megan on the show on with us a little bit ago, and I know that she said that Orlando, where she's from, is big on burgers. But I also want to point out that Megan, you will get a follow-up email with the recording. If you missed or want to go back and hear this again, Megan's going to send the email out. But you can always, there's a lot of resources we're going to be dropping in the chat, and you may miss something. And if you want to connect to one of us after this series and say, I want to learn more about this, or I want to go deeper on that, or I didn't catch that. If you go to communityworks.org and you click the Discovery tab, that'll get you in touch with Megan, and Megan can direct you to one of the resources we talk about throughout the day. So when do you meet Megan? All right, let's see what kind of days we're coming up with. Cultural Culinary Cook-Off Challenge, Arts and Crafts.
Love the Steves.
Day,
Well
Soccer
done.
Day. Nice. Festival of Outdoor Games. Nice. Bless our community day. Love it. Showcase your talent. Your skills night. Share your favorite recipe dinner. Outdoor movie series. Azalea Park would get best burger in Orlando day. Nice. Maybe a board game day. Yes. Multicultural area. So ethnic food celebration. Nice. Human Kindness Day. Volunteer to help your neighbor day. Oh, wonderful ideas. And you get to do that. If you want to do that, create that for your neighborhood. And I guess here's the point. I just want to throw out a quick statistic before we move on here. I really want to get to Jennifer and David. So 74% of Americans report feeling non-belonging in their local community. And that comes from the people that did the research, the authors of the research that's behind the Belonging Barometer. And just there's, boy, that hits you, doesn't it? 74% are experiencing non-belonging in their local community. And obviously that has implications if you look at the research on how we feel about our state, how we feel about our country, and increases polarization and those kinds of factors. So that's really a statistic that hits home. And the great thing is neighboring holidays is a way to help to counteract that. And sometimes we think it has to be a big lift, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And so we're going to talk with Jennifer and David about how to use neighboring holidays as a way to create belonging in your neighborhood and with your neighbors, because your neighborhood is unique and it is worth celebrating. So I'd like to start us off with just inviting Jennifer and then David, if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll get into some moderated questions that I've got prepared. And then at the end, we'll spend the last 15 minutes answering questions from our audience. So you can be thinking about your questions for our guest speakers today. I would ask that you, if you have a question, if you move your cursor across your screen, and you'll see at the bottom, there's a couple of pop bubbles, and it says Q&A. If you could use the Q&A box as a place to drop your questions, we'll use that as a way to organize our conversation for that Q&A at the end. All right. So with that, Jennifer, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
So thank you for this invitation. I see different people coming up in the chat that are here that we know. And so this is a great time to just reconvene for new faces and people who are kind of coalescing around this idea of neighboring and what it can do for us individually, personally, for our communities, for our country, and ultimately for our world. So thanks for joining us. I'm just happy to be here. My role is as the director of the Hopeful Neighborhood Project. The Hopeful Neighborhood Project's goal is to equip and inspire everyday people to just kind of live into that role in their life as neighbors. And so it's a simple goal. We have really deep materials. We have sort of getting started materials like these neighboring holidays, and we'll talk more about this. Now, Eric, you said in this paper that I got to share what my neighboring holiday would be. And so I'm going to do that because I got this idea this morning. So I will also share that I've lived in every type of neighborhood. So I grew up on a ranch in rural Nebraska. My first job was in urban Chicago, and now I live in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri. So I can think of different examples of neighboring holidays and how to celebrate in any kind of neighborhood you might be from, because I've lived there. But particularly in my neighborhood right now, we have a pond, and that pond has some ducks. And every spring they lay eggs. And it is the big talk of the neighborhood of like where the eggs are in the spring and whatever. So I would have a duck baby shower. And we would do something maybe to bless the kids in our neighborhood or to celebrate the ducks. And I think the reason, like Eric said, that we kind of play with this kind of thought is that the uniqueness of a neighborhood actually increases that belonging. And so the more unique and customized you can think about your celebration, the more belonging it creates, right? Because David doesn't really want to come to my duck baby shower because these aren't his ducks, right?
But you throw great parties, so yes, I would.
When they're your ducks, right, then you feel a different sense of connection to the people in the place around you. And so anyway, that's my idea, is the duck baby shower. There we go.
Love
David,
it. Love it.
follow that.
Well, yeah, that's going to be tough. I'm David Burton. I'm a community development specialist. I work with University of Missouri Extension. I have for 23 years now, headquartered in Springfield, Missouri. And then I guess since about 2018, I've been pursuing this idea of neighboring and what it means to love my neighbor, and what it, more specifically, what does it mean to be an engaged neighbor. So that's been kind of my focus. Now, if I would create a holiday, I would probably say to create a whole week of neighboring, but we're going to talk about that later. We've already got that in Missouri. So I need to pick something else. And I know there is a National Dog Day, but I would probably need to create a National Shih Tzu Diva Day, because my dog is a Shih Tzu. He really does not consider himself a dog. He's a little above that. So he needs his own separate holiday. And I'm sure wherever there's people, I'm sure he would love to be there. So we could get neighbors together to celebrate with him.
Excellent. Excellent.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and David, let's stick with you then for, you mentioned a Good Neighbor Week, and you've really dug deep into this neighboring holiday idea. So maybe you could share a little bit more about that story, and how you got involved, and how the momentum built for that Missouri Good Neighbor Week.
Sure. Well, I'm glad to tell my story. Maybe this will resonate with someone else who's on here. I have to tell you that I thought I was a really good neighbor until I discovered I was not. We had this moment where we realized that people had moved and come and gone from around us, and we really only had one neighbor we even knew the name of. And we never spoke to any of them. We might have waved at them. And so we decided that my wife and I decided we really need to do a better job of connecting and loving our neighbors. So it started out as a personal endeavor. It started out with a plate of cookies and our contact information. And just as I got more interested in the topic, I think my first thought was, I wonder if there's anyone else crazy enough to write a book about this or be interested in the topic. And sure enough, there was, right? The Art of Neighboring was the first book that I had read about neighboring. And then as we were trying to do some things with our neighbors, I was just researching online things for neighboring that I could find. As my father-in-law says, I was on the Googler, and I was just seeing what I could find. And I found National Good Neighbor Day, a holiday. And before Extension, my background was media and marketing. And I knew the importance of being able to attach an activity to an existing holiday or an existing movement of some sort, not just for the media attention it might garner, but also for the legitimate excuse it gives you to take action and do something. And so I think that was in 2018. I just used National Good Neighbor Day as an excuse to reach out to the neighbors on my street and to have a little party. We did a little cook out our driveway, cook some hamburgers, had some conversation. I knew early on I didn't want to get into trying to entertain my neighbors. I just wanted to develop connections and have them be present. And in 2019, I tried to take that from my neighborhood to the community and get others excited about celebrating National Good Neighbor Day. And I think it's somewhere about in that time even that Jennifer and I had made a connection, because Jennifer's in Missouri and we had other similar backgrounds and connections and things. We were both interested in neighboring and making these connections because we knew what it had done in our own lives. We knew what it could do in a community as well. And so we kind of connected over this idea of National Good Neighbor Day and a holiday. It gave us an excuse to do what we were wanting to do more of and what we were wanting to inspire others to do. So that's kind of how I ended up interested in this holiday.
Yeah, and I think folks should know, right? So it's become National Missouri Good Neighbor Week, and that's actually on the books, right? I mean, that's gone through the state legislature, right?
Yeah,
this is
yes.
something being really
And that,
pushed, right? Strategic acts of neighboring, right, is a really important thing. And you have like over $10,000 recorded.
yeah, we had almost
neighboring, correct?
We had almost 19,000 acts of neighboring recorded last year, and I may have said Missouri Good Neighbor Week even in my the two are almost interchangeable to me. I lose track of what I've said, I guess, but yeah, we connected over National Good Neighbor Day originally, and then really connected and partnered further with Missouri Good Neighbor Week. And really, Eric, that came about. I would love to tell you I had this strategic vision and plan, and that every bit of the plan fell into place, but that just wouldn't be the truth. We were doing National Good Neighbor Day together, and that year I'd had more success in the county where I'm in. It began on my street, went to my community, expanded to my county, and I just happened to be at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and my state representative sat down the table with me, and he'd seen some publicity we had about National Good Neighbor Day and the impact. And so he asked a question that no one else had asked me, and I hadn't given much thought to. And he said, "So what's your dream for this? What do you want? Where do you want to go with this?" And really just top of mind, I just said, "I don't know. I think it'd be neat to celebrate for a whole week in Missouri." And next thing I know, he'd written a bill, and he had me to Jeff City to testify about the bill and the importance of neighboring. And we strategically began Missouri Good Neighbor Week on National Good Neighbor Day, and then run it for 7 days. And so I was glad he carried that forward, and through a very strange set of circumstances, it got signed into law the last day of the Missouri session. And I wish I could say I had that all planned out and I knew that's what was going to happen, but it was a surprise, but it was serendipitous, right? And it worked out really great. So yeah, we could celebrate for a whole week in Missouri, and I think that gives it more. It works better with calendars and schedules, but it certainly gives it more legitimacy in this state, and it's generated a lot of attention. But again, Jennifer and Hopeful Neighborhood Project have partnered with that as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so I should have said it earlier on. You correct me if I'm wrong, but September 28th, I believe, is National Good Neighbor Day. That's what's official on the books. But usually, yeah, any time in this time frame, right? It's a point on the calendar to give an excuse to, hey, bump into your neighbor. Jennifer, you got pulled in pretty quickly into this, so I don't know if you want to say any more about your story.
Yeah, I will. I'll share a little bit about kind of what we learned as we launched the Hopeful Neighborhood Project. What we learned, especially in the early days, is the people who would call and be interested in neighboring, and this may fit a number of you on this call as well, really loved the idea of being engaged and doing something good. Pursuing the common good is language that we use a lot, But we found that a number of people, when we got to the point of the conversation of like, yes, that's great, blah, 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 how would you start? Who do you know? A lot of people actually didn't know their neighbors. So much like, kind of David's story, they had been kind of whatever led to this idea for whatever reason of yeah, we should do something locally to make the world a better place and the place we live more like the place we've always wanted to live. We don't know our neighbors. And so, I kind of was trying to think about, well, what can people do to get to know their neighbors or to get to know their neighbors better? Because a lot of people will say things, like, well, that's, Jenny across the street, or, Sally lives over here. But when it would come to doing an activity of something good in the neighborhood, they didn't know them well enough to ask for any sort of, or even invite. They felt nervous about that. So this idea of neighboring holidays then was really intriguing to me because number one, it takes intentions and puts it on the calendar, like David said. And it provides this kind of what I like to think of as top of the funnel approach to get down to actually work in your neighborhood. So in order to do work in your neighborhood, you need to know people, and you need to know them, and you need to start to know them on a deeper and deeper level. So if you're a person who knows everyone on your street but doesn't know them well, a neighboring holiday can get you to that next level of engagement and interaction and a celebration. If you don't know anybody, it's a good excuse to introduce yourself. And so it really provides a way for people to kind of move down this funnel of just interest into actually community engagement. And so that's why I was like, yes, let's do something. Let's sign up. The Hopeful Neighborhood Project really wants to put a lot of weight behind this. And because of the traction that we saw locally in Missouri, we wanted to continue and put a lot of weight behind it nationally as well. So we now manage that website and are trying to create this, bigger movement in all locations, in all neighborhoods, just to help others do what we've been able to do here and just use it as a great excuse to celebrate neighboring. And September is a pretty great time of the year in most places to get outside and to celebrate. So people are kind of outside anyway. So that also makes it really great. But there's other times of the year that you can celebrate, pick your own holidays, do a duck baby shower, whatever. The idea is neighboring, but National Good Neighbor Day is just one that's really an easy place to start, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. It makes me think, the research is that we all think that, that other person, whoever that is, doesn't really want to know us or talk to us, right? That's
Right.
not just our default. But it's in breaking through that is when life gets richer, fuller, better, right? Because we're doing life together. That we're social beings, and so that it just makes life that much better. And then that starts us moving into a space where we can work together on common projects that make everything better for everybody, right? And so that's
Yep.
just great. Thanks for that funnel kind of analogy.
Yeah.
So so I guess maybe we'd go back to you, David, for this next. I'd love to learn more about what have you learned through the process of doing these neighboring holidays, which I know you do everything from a lawn art initiative to cookouts to all the above, right? But how do you make neighboring holidays that aren't just fun, but they even create a difference where you live?
Yeah, I think, well, the holidays are a great place to start, but don't leave it there, right? We've in our own neighborhood have used the holiday as a way to make those connections, to have an excuse to ring a doorbell and deliver something. But then once you know the names, look for ways to be able to use the names and establish some trust and find ways to do ongoing connection, even around the area of service. We have a park fairly near our neighborhood. We've done some service cleanup days at the park, and the people I invite are the ones that are in my phone on my text list for my neighbors. And we've got together and had burgers one time, or ice cream sandwiches, just simple things that help build connection, but then also then leverage that to do something else positive. Service time in the park. We did a project for some widows in our neighborhood, replacing batteries and smoke detectors for them. It's a simple thing, but the things you learn about other people as you're carrying a ladder down the street and as you're changing batteries, it strengthens that camaraderie even more. So if you can leverage it, I think, to create other times to interact and work together, that pays dividend in the long run. I will add this. You don't have to make the driveway party fancy. My wife loves homemade ice cream. We talked about doing ice cream on the driveway, and then something came up with her. She's been taking care of some aging parents, and I just ran to the store and bought ice cream sandwiches. And we'd already invited people, and people came, and the adults even said, "Oh, it's been forever since I've had ice cream sandwiches." And the kids even probably preferred that over homemade ice cream. And it was simple. And what didn't get used stored in my freezer really easily until I wanted to eat it. So keep it simple. And I think the bar is set so low that it's hard to step under it. I had a neighbor near me. They'd moved 14 times. They decided to retire and settle on our street. We had a little snowstorm. I went down and shoveled their driveway and sidewalk. It's a very short sidewalk and driveway. And she came out, gave me hot chocolate, said I was the best neighbor they'd ever had from all the places they'd ever lived. And that was the only thing I had ever done for them. It was only the second time I'd ever even talked to her. And that qualified me as the best neighbor ever. And so to me, that's just a reminder that the bar is set really low. So don't stress yourself out over this. Put out some lawn chairs, find a way to invite a few neighbors, and just build those connections. And I think you'll see it grow from there.
Eric, I want to, yeah, I know that from the registration list and just from, what we're doing, that there's probably a number of people that are here that are from, maybe aren't just thinking personally, but also thinking how they can use their position, whether it's city government or library, or we've done some things with coffee shops, neighborhood associations, which might be, that fits maybe a little bit more with some of David's examples. But so I just want to speak to that a little bit and to say, first of all, community leaders play a really important role in this, because you have a voice, you have a role, you can do this as your job. And that's so helpful. But to also keep in mind what David was saying about some organizations or some places call this a block level strategy, that the more local you can get it and you can support it, the better. So if you're in city government, rather than bringing everybody out of their neighborhoods to celebrate at City Hall, what could you do to disperse that energy and equip the neighborhood leaders or equip one person? If you're a library, bring people in for sure. We love that, and we love libraries, but maybe make sure that everyone knows you've got lawn games that can be checked out, or puzzles that could travel around your neighborhood for a traveling puzzle, or think about ways that you can use the resources that you have to disperse and create community locally, as well as bringing people in and knowing the larger supports that they have. But I think David's, one of his core messages here is, don't overthink it. Start with something and it will grow over time. So if you're a library and you've showed up and you're like, last year we colored these things, what else could we do this year? Just think of one extra thing. Next year it'll be one more thing. It's fine. If this is the first time you've done something, don't think you have to do everything all at once. Just start celebrating, and start kind of figuring out who else is sort of resonating with this message. So for David, that he and I started resonating. I know other places that this is a story not exactly around National Neighbor Day and National Good Neighbor Day, but one library and one bookstore in a local town over COVID that we're close to collaborated and did a community-wide event just because they were both interested in the same thing. So, if you're a library and, all of a sudden the police chief comes in and is really excited about like reading a book, then maybe next year you've got another partner. And then maybe next year there's another partner that comes in, or maybe then there's association president who does something cool and you're like, let's see if we can get other neighborhood associations to do this kind of thing. So start small, and in that starting small, look for someone else that's like sort of resonating with this message, so that you're not alone next year to do something bigger. Now you've got a partner to do something bigger, and grow it over time that way. And just don't be discouraged by roadblocks, and don't be discouraged by that small start, because it all matters. It's all important.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I will note, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name. Ritu says, I highly appreciate Jennifer's emphasis on being as local as possible. And that echoes David's comments as well. And I do want to make sure we're going to drop in the National Good Neighbor Day website into the chat as well. And a lot of the groups that Jennifer just mentioned, there's some very simple tools that you can use, some toolkits that you can use, download, whether you're at church or a library or a coffee shop, or there's something for most of us, neighborhood association, or if you just something for yourself as an individual that you want to do with that, those 8 doors that surround your house, your abode. There's toolkits on that website that you can go and download, and gives you a starting place. So
Yeah.
And I just saw that Chet talked about block level strategies, and I would like to shout him out a little bit, because there's a resource on National Good Neighbor Day that really can help with this idea that David was talking about building connections in a simple way. And I love this idea, and so I borrowed it from him, created a template, and it's on there. But I want to shout him out for it. And the idea is name tags, and not just name tags, but also name tags that have some information that allows you not to have to be in a role. If you're doing ice cream sandwiches on the driveway and you're being host, you're trying to welcome everyone who comes in and make sure everyone's talking and all of that, and that can get difficult. So Chet had this brilliant idea of the name tags, where I'm trying to think what we put on there, but it's where you, like, your address, and then hobbies, and I think your hometown. I can't remember if we put that on, and anything else that you could think of that would connect people is on that name tag, so that they can see, like, oh, you're a runner, I'm a runner, and they see that on the name tag, and they have an immediate connection, a way to move forward in the conversation and connect later. And you didn't have to do that all as a host. Now, Chet takes this one step further, which is even more brilliant, and he collects those name tags for his ongoing kind of neighborhood engagements. And so every Wednesday, I think it is, that they meet once a month, the first Wednesday of the month or something like that. I probably have that all wrong, Chet, but I know it's once a month, and he gets those name tags back. And I think the really great psychological thing about that is that now you're in the book, right? So when we talk about belonging, all of a sudden, when Chet takes that name tag back and puts it in this little binder, he's probably doing it to save time and resources. But what it really does is it puts your name in a book, right? And so when I go next month and I'm flipping through, I'm like, oh, Becky's not here this month. I really enjoyed talking to her. I'll have to follow up, right? Or I'm thinking, should I stay on my couch or should I go? And there's just something about knowing, well, they're going to miss me if I'm not there because my name tag's not going to be taken, right? So I just think it's a brilliant idea. I wanted to shout him out because he's here. And it's a way to take the first meeting is the name tag, and then figuring out a way to further those connections and that belonging. That's a simple idea of how to do it. So I'll stop there.
no, I think that's where we want to go next. Exactly. So thank you. And thank you, Chet, and fellow Highland. I'll just note that. So something's in the water, right? No, but really, I appreciate Eric also commenting the importance of not overthinking. Thank you, Eric. That was really important. The name tag resources dropped in the chat as well. And so, yeah, that's where I would love to go next. Is right. So let's start to get a little bit practical. Maybe David, you can start us off with this. Is like, yeah. So just walk us through how do you to get to that point to where you get people out and they're connected. Yeah, just to walk us through your process for making that happen.
My process probably more closely aligns with something called the idea friendly method. And the whole idea of that approach is starting small and then finding someone that will partner with you and letting it grow sort of naturally from there. And the creator of that, Becky, up in Iowa, one of the examples she uses is of a Kansas town where a business owner on Main Street had a dream of doing a community-wide picnic with tables lining the entire Main Street and inviting everybody in this small town. But she wasn't sure how she could pull that off and the resources and so forth. And so she started with one folding table in front of her business one year. And the businesses next door said, hey, can we join you in that next year? And then there were 3 tables or 4 tables. And now that community has this annual event with tables all the way down Main Street. And it's turned into a whole thing, and she has people that help. And so early on, hearing that story, I had to kind of rein myself in on what type of approach I could take that would be sustainable and manageable. Kind of like Eric, I may have a tendency to overthink things. And, when you say block party, I may be thinking already of bounce houses and what local band I could invite. But I've had to rein back from that, just even for the sake of resources. And really my first endeavor was just to have, I called them driveway chats. And I asked different neighbors in the neighborhood to host one every month. And here was my stressful sales pitch. Here's the date. Could I invite neighbors to bring their lawn chairs to your driveway? I'm not asking you to provide food. I'm not asking you to provide games. Just, can we use your driveway for a chat that night? And everybody was like, well, yeah, sure. That sounds like fun. And so you could bring your own beverage if you wanted to. And some people did. And the first one we hosted on my driveway, we had 6 people. My wife asked if I was disappointed, and I said, well, it's better than 0. But every month we would do one, we had more and more people show up. And at the end of the summer in September, we had 72 people show up at the final household with lawn chairs just to sit around and chat for 2 hours. And then one of the other, I guess, one kind of the amazing thing that came from that, and is that final household, when they hosted, that host decided to end up running for city council and won a council seat. And he told me that it was all because of the driveway chats. He didn't feel connected. He didn't feel like he knew anybody. He didn't know if he had anything to contribute. And that single event changed his mind and caused him to run for city council. And I thought, wow, lightning has struck. This is awesome. But this year, I'm happy to report that lightning has struck twice. Not only is Eric still a council member, Justin, who's at the other end of the neighborhood, got involved in a similar fashion. We're not doing driveway chats this year, but we had some other little service project things, and he got connected through a service and ended up running for city council as a result, simply because of these neighbor connections we tried to create.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and we got some stories from West Michigan as well, and other communities. So yeah, those little conversations can bubble up into all kinds of things. And Jennifer, maybe you can talk about your experience, like what's your process? How do you start to think about neighboring holiday events or occasions? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I'll take it a little different direction again because of who we have on the call, just to provide some more insights. One of the things that, as a kind of task force about National Good Neighbor Day, we had a group of people meeting together, and we were sharing, what we had done in our different neighborhoods, et cetera. And one woman mentioned libraries, and that's really what kind of prompted or started us really looking at libraries. And the thing that she said was that, libraries is one of the important community spaces left that everyone has a place at. You don't have to pay to belong. You don't have to pay when you go in. You can have no education and find a lot of useful things at the library. You can have a doctoral degree and find a lot of useful things at the library. You can be a 3-year-old or an 83-year-old. And the library has things for you. But libraries are somewhat under-resourced and understaffed in many communities and areas. And we thought, how could we help use this sort of a really important community building space and introduce neighboring and community building as a part of it. And in that, discovered that a lot of libraries have that sort of as their vision or understand their role in the communities in general. Particularly, so, I mentioned that I've got a background in a lot of different communities, but I have a real heart then for small towns and community building in small towns that are traditionally fairly good at community, but but small rural life in America, small town life in America is changing like everything else. And there's a lot of pressures and stressors on that community building. And so we saw a lot of libraries from smaller places really step up and lean into this last year. And that was a really beautiful thing to see. And so, yeah, I can't remember the question exactly, but practically speaking, right. I think that strategy I found to be really energizing to not, I am not going back on my keep it as local as possible words. But yet, finding these places where people who might not feel comfortable on my driveway, or maybe if they're getting engaged to the library and writing something they like about the community or seeing good things in the community. I know there's a few people on the call who mentioned that they're really in cross-cultural communities. And so, when someone sees like the thing I love about my neighborhood is that there's so many different languages spoke here. Well, that can give belonging and confidence to a new person in the neighborhood who's not sure if that's welcome. Or maybe there's a sense of, well, I'm older and I don't belong anymore. I'm not going to show up to this driveway chat because who wants an 83-year-old, at the driveway chat? It's clearly for young families. Well, maybe they go to the library and they see, or they get a postcard that someone at the library made, particularly, thanking them for the legacy that they've left behind and all the work that they've done, just in their life and the value that they have as a senior in the community. Well, now maybe that increases belonging. So I think one of the things, practical things that I really learned is how we can use these bigger entities to help set the stage and the tone for more belonging. Yeah, I'll stop there. I have another example, but I'll see what your questions might be.
Eric, something Jennifer said made me think of something that we may have missed or that we're just assuming. I think the other part of this is looking at what assets you have. And that was just assumed when I was saying that. I didn't even explain why I did what I did, what the assets were. We had a lot of shaded driveways. I knew it'd be cooler there. It's just that kind of played into that. And now, once a month we do a coffee on the driveway, and that's only because my wife loves coffee and she loves to get people together to have coffee and to talk about coffee and to try different kinds of coffee and things. And it's just simple and people come and partake in it. It's just because that's an interest that she has and a passion she has. So whatever your passion is, maybe it's something that you can connect that to the effort so that you have enthusiasm for doing it.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah, local assets, yeah, and then building on that. Love that. And I love the interplay here, right? So, David, I saw you mentioned talk about the 8 doors in your immediate surrounding. Make that your unit of change if you're working at your neighborhood level. And then Jennifer asking us to think about, your institution as a neighbor, right? How can it be a good neighbor in the community? Love the interplay. So I wonder, we're coming close to where we need to transition to some Q&A time. People are starting to drop questions in the chat, but I want to give space, David and Jennifer. Do you have any last thoughts? And what's a call to action? What's something we can take away that's practical? Those of us listening in, what's the next step we could do from this conversation, do you think? Any other last thoughts?
What we say on our site is make a plan. So start by making a plan. Whether that's today, you're going to go check out the website and download one of the getting started guides to make your plan, whether it's, if you already got a lot of plans going, but this caused you to, maybe rethink something or add something or subtract something, because it's too much and this needs to be about connection. My thing is just make a plan. So, take the 2-3 minutes after this call to say, okay, what does this compel me to do? What action do I want to do on September 28th? And then be sure to share it with us, because that will create that momentum for next year and next year to grow it. So the more stories we can share, the more the momentum will grow.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, folks, that National Good Neighbor Day website that's in the chat. I mean, if you go there, there's a place where you can put your pin on the map for your zip code. And the map's just beautiful, right? Because it's got such a diversity there of coast to coast work that's happening, and you can be a part of that. It's exciting. So I thank you for
Eric,
that. Yes.
Eric, I might add this then as a wrap up, maybe, and hopefully an encouragement. We've been screening a movie in our area called Join or Die, which is really about Robert Putnam's work in his book Bowling Alone and this idea of social capital. And I had a chance a few weeks ago to be on a Zoom to hear from Robert Putnam and to ask some questions and stuff. And so someone asked him about his life's work, the impact that he had, any regrets, and he was a little subdued about it. Said he felt like they hadn't reached as many people as he wished with this idea of social capital and the effort, and where he had missed the mark. He had hoped they would have focused more on community leaders, like opinion leaders and early adopters. And so I think that has absolute application here. If you're on this Zoom, you're probably one of those early adopters, right? So not only doing something around National Good Neighbor Day, but involving others that you know, sharing through word of mouth to get involved and do something on the holiday and helping spread the word. That's how you can take an idea and turn it into a movement. And it really does start with your singular effort where you're at. I'm reminded there's this picture that George Seurat painted in 1897. He was a French painter, and it was unlike all the other paintings before that time. All other painters used brush strokes, and George just used little individual dots that when you step back, it made this great picture. And that's really kind of what each of you are on this call. We're just asking you to do your individual dot, and we're all going to work on our individual dots. And when we step back, we'll have this great picture of the impact that neighboring can have across the United States.
I love that. What a great place to pause and see what questions there are. Just what a beautiful image and an inspiration. I'm definitely more committed now to go out and be my dot as part of this big picture of beautiful picture of greater belonging, greater flourishing because of small or big acts of strategic neighboring. Okay, well, we are going to transition to Q&A, and hopefully you'll bear with me for just a quick plug. I do a shameless plug every time during this transition, and it goes back to a comment from Chet in the chat. Chet asked, what are there national groups that do that support, the fund this kind of neighboring work? Of course, Megan, put in there, you can do a discovery call with her. We can try to explore those kinds of things. But one thing we do at Community Works is we have a seed grant. And it's not a huge fund, but it is a fund to help support some new neighborhoods every year to come more into this line of work. And the seed grant, though, is made possible because of donations. We do have, as part of our September kind of rollout of all this, we do have a September fundraiser. And so we're going to drop in the chat a website that's for our annual cycling event. And this is where we come together as a community and we raise up money that we can then put toward those seed grants. So you are welcome, if you're in a place you want to think about that, to go to that website, Rock Cycling. It's a one-day family-friendly cycling event in West Michigan. You're welcome to come out if you live in West Michigan, but if not, you can fund one of the fundraisers, one of the riders that's listed at the bottom of there, or just make a general donation toward the cause. But that's what this is for, us to raise monies to get things going, get things churning in new neighborhoods. Okay, let's turn now to some questions. Jennifer, David, how do you help others see the value of block level strategies? Others in my neighborhood association believe that people only want entertainment and large events.
Well, maybe I'm the wrong person to ask on this. Every time I get invited to an HOA, I usually end my presentation with saying, An HOA should be about social connections, not enforcing rules. And to date, I've never got invited back to an HOA. So, and I think that's probably because most people who serve on an HOA serve on the board because they're really into the rules. But if we focus more on connection, it would take care of a lot of those types of things. I don't know. I think everybody kind of embraces this at their own pace and a different speed. And Jennifer and Eric may know the McKinneys in Columbia, Missouri as well. They often say neighboring is a crock pot, not a microwave. So it just takes time, and keep doing what you have a passion for and what you're interested in, and people will come along. I have a regular gathering of men and in my driveway or my garage, and I have a gentleman down the street who's a veteran, and it was 2.5 years of invites before he finally came. And now he's the life of the party. And he said when he first showed up, he goes, well, it was starting to look like you guys were having fun and I wanted to be a part of it. We've been at this for 2.5 years, but he just moved at a different pace. So just do something and do it consistently.
Yeah, I would say a yes and to David. But what I found generally in changing people's behavior is that you can't. You can't change their behavior and their beliefs. But what you can do is find the thing that you agree on, and then move forward there. And so if your neighborhood association is having large and entertaining events, that's actually a huge win, right? That's great. That's fantastic. And so because they're doing something. And then what you could do is introduce we should do something different, but what could grow out of, those large and entertaining gatherings. So could you introduce, name tags that are maybe block, color coded by block so that people could see who was on their block, right? It's just a tiny little thing that's probably not going to get any dissent because you're supporting what people want to do, but you're starting to build that recognition. And then maybe you could say, what if you have a competition between the blocks? And so you see which block can bring the most food for the local food pantry to the large and entertaining event, right? And so just introduce it as a way of not going against what people believe, because that they could be right. I mean, people are going to be more engaged in a large and entertaining event, but how can you use that then as a way to introduce and be a catalyst for these really local connections, which is what the block level strategy is about. So Megan, I'm going to guess, has some great ideas around that because she is a strategy expert, especially at block levels. And so a discovery call with Megan would be worth your time. But Hopeful Neighborhood also has coaching calls, and those are on National Good Neighbor Day. And really any of the three of us, sometimes I'll ping someone if you sign up for a coaching call on National Good Neighbor Day, I'll ping David or I'll ping Megan to be like, I actually think this expert would be better for you. So if you want to talk more about that, we would love to kind of brainstorm those kinds of things for that specific question. But hopefully that's helpful information for everyone.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Lots of good chat going on, sharing of resources, ideas in the chat. We're going to move now to a question from Jay. When people ask where we are from, do you have ideas about how to change our answer from the name of the town we live in to the neighborhood we love? So that first introduction.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's more of a statement than a question. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And just kind of learning to do that and leading by example. And maybe asking the follow-up question to anyone who says, I'm from St. Louis. Oh, really? What neighborhood? Might be just a great follow-up question to get people to think a little bit more locally. That's the best idea I have, but I think it's a great idea just to start leading by example and prompting people to think even in their explanation more locally.
That question kind of reminds me of something my kids learned, I think in kindergarten when they were learning their address. They'd say, I live on Kentwood Street in public in the county of Greene, in the state of Missouri, in the United States of America, in the Northern Hemisphere, on planet Earth, that sort of thing. So just backing up one layer, right?
Mm.
The name of your neighborhood and your street. I hadn't ever really thought of it from that perspective. Thanks for that question. That's great to include your neighborhood. A little pride.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, helps get that belonging, right? That we talked about.
Well, and I want to acknowledge, like, for some places that's easier than others, so I live in subdivision world, which is a new world for me, in the suburbs. And so that's easy. We have a name, right? It's Wellington Farms. That's a name that's recognizable. There's a sign. But that's not necessarily true for every place. But you can think about what's the local nomenclature. So there's not when I worked in Chicago, there's not I guess there's the Little Village neighborhood, but that's kind of a bigger space. But you could say Little Village. But then the local nomenclature is K-Town, which is the K name streets that are, much more local. And I think, just keying into, even if you don't have a citywide neighborhood nomenclature, how would people recognize what your neighborhood is? So I grew up in rural. We actually did have a post office at one time, so we had kind of a name. But mostly I recognized when I moved away, none of the other of you know that there's hill people in Nebraska and valley people, right? But I did because I grew up there, and we're most definitely hill people, and valley people do all sorts of crazy, weird things. And I now recognize the rest of the world, we all look the same and we live a mile apart. But those are kind of some challenges to getting to that local explanation, but just really thinking about how can I describe where I live, even if you don't have the benefit of a sign when you drive in, has value. And then trying to explain it when you're talking about where you're from is a lot of value. So thanks for the question and maybe statement there.
Yeah. Chet mentions too, you could use the 100, 200, 300 block or
right.
XYZ, for example. Yeah. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, in Springfield, we have neighborhood associations, but we've been talking about how to better publicize them. They're voluntary. When you talk to a group, most people don't even know there is one or they have access to one. And I'm just thinking about how this statement relates back to that too. If those who are active and board members just got in the habit of saying, I live in Woodland Heights in Springfield, Missouri. I just think it's a great idea. I'm glad he asked the question or made the statement.
You got us thinking. That's great. It's great. We are coming close on time. I do want to mention, so Jana asked about apartments and how this works there. And Jana, I would just encourage you, we dropped the link to have a coaching conversation with Jennifer or Megan. Those are in the chat. Maybe you could follow up with one of them to strategize in that environment. It is a different environment. There are toolkits that are specific to that though. So there are some ways to go about this. Are there, let me ask, I think we have maybe one more question we can sneak in here. Chat asks, are there any I'm sorry, we already talked about the national regional groups that could fund organizers doing this work. So we talked briefly about that. Let's go to the next one here. It says, what if people simply don't show up and continue to not show up? Do you just select a different idea or try again?
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'll just answer real quick. I would say don't get discouraged. A different idea might be the thing. But I would also see if you can find a partner, right? So find somebody, even if nobody showed up, say, who else do I know in the neighborhood that we could do together? Because even if it's just the two of you and you have muffins on Saturday morning, that's a win. That's a connection, right? And then maybe you each know someone that you would invite to the next time. And so if people aren't showing up to just an open call, maybe get really personal and specific with what's just one person I want to spend time with. And then as that grows, who would we want to invite into this small circle? And as that grows, it'll get bigger. So maybe that's I think a different idea could work, but also just if you live in a neighborhood that's just not, maybe everyone's just a little skittish. There's neighborhood trauma, or there's people who just don't know each other well or feel really comfortable. Just be okay with starting super small, like just one other person, and it'll grow.
Well said. Yeah, just just try something. Don't do nothing, but just try something. If it doesn't work, you can always shift to something else. There's no shame in doing that at all.
Yep.
And if it goes for a while and fizzles, Henry Cloud's got a book called Necessary Endings. Sometimes you reach a point, you're like, it's time to bring this one to an end. We'll do this one differently. No shame in that either.
Right.
Excellent, excellent. And I know for us in the ABCD world, we start with questions, right? And we ask those questions like, what are your interests, right? And then you can find a common interest and build from there. And I think that's how you started off with the lawn art initiative, right? It was some people that just had a common interest in something like that, or muraling, or we'd go through all kinds of stories. But if you build it from asking those questions first, I think sometimes you can find your path towards something that's going to resonate, because it's building on people's imagination. So
yeah,
right.
Find out what your interest.
Shout out to the individual coaching calls, because we're happy to really think about your own context and figure that out.
Yeah, find out what you're right. Find out what the neighbors are interested in. I've got a friend that the men on their street get together for wing competitions, and they've done some other things and connected, realized that they all had their own wing recipes and they liked wings. And I don't think that would fly on my street, but it works really well on his. So find out what the interests are and the assets.
Yep. Asking the questions first and building around that, right, is an important concept. Okay, well, you can sense the energy. There's interest here, and unfortunately, we've got a couple questions that we didn't get to, but I apologize for that. Do schedule a coaching call so you can get those questions answered, get some thinking about around things. Have a partner with you in this. But hey, Jennifer, David, you are such a wealth of wisdom and inspiration. Thank you so much for being on. Everyone joining in today, giving up an hour of your time, thank you so much. And we just want to encourage you to go out, whatever it is. Don't let the big ideas get in the way of doing something. Just do something. Use Good Neighbor Day as an opportunity, as an excuse to get people together and get people out. So thank you very much for coming and joining in. And again, nationalgoodneighborday.org. Let's do this.
Thank you so much. Happy neighboring, everyone.
Thanks, Eric. Yes.